Okay, so good afternoon and thanks for joining us today for this pre-EAPI webinar. Today we would be having a very interesting discussion. We'll be talking about the green economy in Kenya and then how it's pushing for the region and what the trends are and how we can learn from this. I'll do a very quick presentation before I introduce my panel. So let me share my screen first. So what we'll be talking about today is titled Kenya is at the forefront of green certification, funding, and technology in Africa. Will the region and continent follow suit? And what have we learned from Kenya's recent green bonds enlisting? My quick presentation would precede whatever we need to do now. But just to kickstart this, we've seen climate change to be a very key feature in construction now, and we are saying that basically we cannot tackle the climate change issues without taking a look at building emissions, mainly because buildings are a very key feature when it comes to the use of resources. When it comes to construction, a lot of stuff that you do would be in buildings. You would need a building to school in, you need a building to work in, you need a building to actually worship in and all that. So anything that we do is, it has a building in it, involved. And buildings take a lot of energy. They use a lot of water. If we are able to really consider how we put up these buildings, it's going to, make a very big impact on climate change. We see that there is a lot of economic opportunity for us. About 80% of this is actually untapped. And we believe there is a lot of solutions that are available currently, and we can use that to help sort this out. Green buildings is seen to be a 768 billion investment opportunity in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we say this because new buildings are coming up. From now to 2030, we see a lot of buildings coming up, especially within the developing countries. And all of these buildings provides an opportunity for investors to ensure that these buildings are built right from the start. We do not need to make the mistakes that developed countries made and are now doing in retrofit for their projects. We have the opportunity to start from scratch and then make sure that from the beginning it's done right. Now, one of the challenges that we've seen across Africa and in most of the developed economies is that we see green buildings to be very expensive and difficult to achieve. However, IFC has been working a lot with clients, and we're seeing that the cost of going green is actually around 3%. Payback is also within 3 years. And for all the stakeholders that are involved in the built environment, they get to benefit by going green. When you look at developers, you look at the owners themselves, you look at the occupiers, you look at even the financial institutions and policymakers. They all stand to benefit from going green. And some of these benefits comes from, one of the major benefits is lower operating costs. And this is really important. We always talk about affordable housing, and we believe that you cannot have an affordable housing without the maintenance or operational cost also being affordable. The research is saying people within the low income brackets spend as much as 50 to 20% of their income on utility bills. If we have buildings that are green and then are very efficient in the use of resources, we would be able to reduce this down and they can use the extra income to do something else, right? So it's very, very key. We are seeing a big drive for sustainability and innovation. And I believe the initial slide I've shown is one of the reasons that is pushing this. We are also seeing this drive for innovation and sustainability mainly because of the new products that are coming on the market. We are seeing developers, we're seeing investors, and even governments coming up with very innovative incentives for green building. When it comes to construction, we are seeing some financial institutions coming up with new products, green construction and then green mortgages that is helping developers and people that are looking to buy these buildings or to occupy these homes to have access to them, right? We are also seeing the capital markets come into play where the developers and financial institutions are raising money from the capital market to be able to put up these buildings. So it made it very easy. It made it easier and simple for the green building industry to actually develop. This is a case study of Acorn, who were the first to issue a green bond in Kenya, and they're able to do this on the back of their EDGE certified project. This basically, gives you an example of what's possible when projects are certified green. Right. This is also another case study of APSA. APSA was the first to launch a green mortgage in South Africa, and they did that in collaboration with one of our EDGE client called Baldwin Properties. And the surprising thing was, in the first month of its launch, Baldwin was able to sell a record of 807 homes in 1 month, right? And that's really tells you that the market is really looking for something new. If the product is something that speaks to them, they would go for it. And it's actually, it encouraged other financial institutions in South Africa to also look at this sector and then do something different. Now, this particular slide is actually looking at what some of the projects have done. Sometimes we think going green means doing some very sophisticated stuff in your building, putting in some state-of-the-art gadgets, very expensive stuff and all that. But the projects that are being certified green, when we look at them, we see that it's very simple and basic things that they are putting in there. They are making sure that their design is as practical as possible. Looking at the Best Western Hotel in Nairobi, which is actually the first hotel to be certified in Kenya, they looked at very sensible approaches such as natural ventilation. They had solar hot water collectors, they had LED lighting. And then when it came to water, they had low flow faucets and other sensible water measures in there. These are stuff that a lot of projects can easily do and achieve. When we go to the retail sector, we have shopping malls in Cote d'Ivoire, Zambia, and Ghana that have been certified recently with EDGE. And they also used very simple and cost-effective measures to get to get these buildings to be green. And surprisingly, with the Great North Mall in Zambia, they are actually looking at a 40% reduction in their utility bills. We also have IHS. IHS was actually one of the first to use EDGE in Africa, and they did this in South Africa. And after certifying their projects for a while, they actually did their research to see exactly how much their clients were saving from buildings that were green. And they realized that the savings across the year was equal to 1 month's rent, right? This was, this is very interesting. And then also when it came to incremental cost, when they started certifying their projects, the cost of going green was usually about 6%. But with time, they were able to change their process and then incorporate these measures right at the beginning, at the design stage, and able to bring it down to as low as 0.8% per unit. So it tells us that basically in doing green design and green buildings, it's very important to have your timing right. When exactly are you incorporating these measures? Our experience have shown that for projects that incorporate the measures at a very late stage, that tend to have a higher incremental cost. But those that really start from the beginning, they design and make sure that the basic passive measures are incorporated right from the beginning, are able to save a lot on that. We also have ALP, which is one of the biggest warehousing companies in Ghana, in Kenya, that is getting their project certified. Interestingly, ALP is actually looking at getting to net zero in a few years' time. And they are also getting their projects to be green by using very simple options. They have solar PVs, they have skylights, they have insulations, and then they have low flow plumbing fixtures in there. They are looking at saving as much as 16,000 USD in operational costs, right? We've seen governments coming up with incentives for green building. We've actually helped some of these cities to implement these in their countries, and we've listed a few of them here. Some of them are fiscal, some of them are non-fiscal, being that some of them may cost these cities money to implement some of these measures. Others too are simply very easy and straightforward. It's very interesting seeing that these cities are interested in providing the opportunity, or providing the incentive for the developers to really go green. And we are hoping that we will get a lot more across the continent. If you look at the slide, you realize that we only have, in Africa, we are seeing just Ghana and Kenya. We actually have another incentive in South Africa, which is not listed here. In South Africa, they are providing developers with some kind of awareness raising on how they can get their projects to be green. They are providing technical support, right? Their intention is that in the few years' time, you would see a lot more cities across Africa coming up with incentives for green buildings. Now, one of the major questions that we get from developers is how they can choose the most cost-effective option to design green, right? And how can they ensure that their clients or their customers are able to recognize the value of going green? And we always say the answer, the solution is actually Edge. Because with Edge, you are able to see for yourself what exactly qualifies as green. You're able to see the measures that you can choose to get your project to meet the particular standard. And not just that, you're also able to see exactly how much it's going to cost you, what the incremental cost for making this selection is going to be. How long is it going to take you to recoup that particular investment? You also have an achievable standard of 20% on energy, water, and then materials. And once you meet the standard, you are able to access a verified green label, which you can use to brand your project as green. This same green label can be used to raise financing in the market where green financing is available. So if you look at the software, at a click, you're able to get information on all of this. You're able to see how much savings you are getting from energy, water, and then for your materials. You're also able to see the utility cost reduction on your projects. You're able to see the incremental costs. You're able to see the payback. So it's very, very it's very, very detailed, and it's such that even the financial officers, or accountants, that can be able to at a click see what the sense is in for going green, be able to take a decision on whether it's going to be necessary for them to go green or not. Be able to take a decision on which kind of technical measures they should invest in to get the project to meet the green requirement. I want to say that EDGE is supported by our donors. Our main donor is the UK aid. We also had money from SECO in times past. We've also received some kind of support from Austria, Canada, Denmark, EU, Finland, Hungary, and Japan. Right. So thank you, and I would stop sharing and then introduce my panel. Okay, so I have my panel online. I hope you can see the pictures of everyone, the video. Okay, everybody's camera is on now. So I would give you the opportunity to introduce yourself in a few seconds. Let us know your name, what you do, and then your background. So let's start with Kioi.
Thanks, Dennis, and thank you, everybody. My name is Kioi Wamba, based in Nairobi. I work with International Housing Solutions. We are a real estate fund that focus primarily on affordable housing. We have been in the market since 2007 and have been delivering housing in Southern Africa, and we are now basically set up and operating in Nairobi. Background-wise, engineering.
And then we have Maruza.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks. My name is Maruza Chikwana. I'm a Zimbabwean, based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm the development director for Africa Logistics Properties. We're a real estate developer, industrial assets in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania. Dennis, is that right?
Hello. Hello, sorry. So I don't know if I lost the connection or it's from the system. Marisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Pretty much I finished with my introduction. It was very brief.
All right. Yeah, so then let's move to Jane from APSA.
Thank you, Dennis. So my name is Jane Wayaki. I head sustainability at APSA Bank Kenya, a Pan-African financial institution, and looking at sustainability from across the organization, mainly driving the strategy for the bank. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Rangav.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raghav Gandhi. I'm the Managing Director for Acorn Investment Management Limited. Acorn is a leading real estate integrated firm providing rental housing across Nairobi and its metropolitan area. Our initial focus has been in student accommodation. We also are a licensed REIT manager, having launched 2 REITs at the start of 2021.
Great. And then we have Jeffrey.
My name is Geoffrey Maura, head of credit at Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. This is a new institution established in 2018 to bring affordability and working in the secondary market to refinance mortgages in the country.
Okay, great. So thanks for the introductions. Let's go directly into our questions. I would want to start with Rangav. So Rangav, my question to you is, what's the motivation for a developer to build green certified projects? And is this something that you see as a trend for the future in our region, Kenya and East Africa?
Thanks, Dennis. Good question. I think the motivation from our side, I would say is twofold, at least what I can think of initially. First is, as essentially responsible citizens of the global community, it's obviously very important that we manage our carbon footprint and our contribution to the carbon footprint. A lot of focus when it comes to carbon footprint is around the use of fossil fuels, but what a lot of people perhaps don't know or don't appreciate is that buildings themselves are significant contributors to carbon footprint. In fact, it's estimated that by 2020, the embedded carbon in materials for construction will amount to about 60% of the global carbon, the global greenhouse gases. So it's quite a significant amount, and I think if really it's not something that, as we all know, tackle at that stage. It's more about what you can do now, and that also brings me on to the second element on what is our motivation, which is the fact that as a world, as a global community, that's an area that everyone is focused on, and if you want, from a strategic standpoint, to work with the leading institutions, whether they be investors or other strategic partners. If you want to work with the leading institutions across the world, then you got to show a commitment in this space, and that's something we're very conscious of, and that's what we want to exhibit our commitment. Is this a trend that will continue? I think very much so. You touched upon it yourself, when you were talking about retrofitting. If there's something that we can do now, you might as well do it now, as opposed to kind of coming up with a half-baked or a suboptimal solution and now only to then incur additional expenses later on when one of your partners turns around and kind of exclaims that why is it that you never built your buildings in a certain way?
Great. So, just following up on that with Kiri, IHS, we know you guys are are investing in affordable housing in Kenya, and you are actually making green certification a very key condition for your investments in affordable housing. Now, how are you able to get your portfolio to meet the EDGE certification standard? Because the feedback is green cannot be affordable. But here's the case: you are doing affordable housing and then still getting it to be green. How are you able to do this?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that this will be the fourth country on the African continent that we will be adopting and introducing basically green technology and green certification. I think for us, there have been various tools in the market that are basically used globally for providing green certification. I think from our own research, we found EDGE as the most viable one. We have spent a lot of time trying to understand EDGE, the processes, the procedures, the protocols that I basically use to basically get a better understanding, the certification process, the roles of the experts and also of the auditors. And from that, we have then now begun embedding the EDGE process even in our design process, because if you don't do that, it basically won't work. And we have been very fortunate to basically go through that process. It's been challenging because we've basically been the first kids on the block bringing something new. And then you are not just talking about green technology, you're talking about green technology and affordable housing. So it sometimes sounds like an oxymoron, but we are very fortunate that it's actually worked, and we have over 8,000 units that have been EDGE certified on the African continent to date. Wow.
Great. 8,000 units certified, affordable housing units, actually.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, right. So following on that, Maruza, I want to come to you. What do you think the real estate industry can do to really reduce the negative impacts, of the built environment? As we've seen, the built environment contributes to about 25% of global CO2 emissions. And if this continues, it could result in buildings that do not meet the standard for today's or the future climate. What exactly is the real estate industry doing? And I would want you to use your organization, EAPI, as an example. What exactly are you guys doing to help curb this?
Thanks, Dennis. Just to clarify, like I said in the beginning of my intro, ALP, we only focus on one asset class. So it's just industrial asset class, warehousing, distribution centers, cold storage, dry storage, grains, and the likes. So my examples will come from that perspective, just to give everybody some context.
Sure.
But as an industry, the first thing I think we all need to be doing is actually to be joining this race to net zero. Like every single one of us, like that should be essentially the first thing we should be doing. And the reason I bring that up as an example is because I was quite surprised that on the continent, there haven't been many signatories to this net zero target, which we need to achieve. And I think the World Green Building Council is pushing for that, IFC, EDGE. And ALP was the first signatory, which is quite surprising. Like, I mean, it's nice that you're the first, but it's kind of sad that you're the only one who's actually making a commitment to get to net zero, which leads you to wonder why. And I think maybe guys don't understand that it's pretty simple. Like, it's not as daunting as maybe a lot of people perhaps may think. So ALP, first thing, pledge to be part of the race. Yeah. The second thing is like understanding what's our current footprint as a developer. And a lot of our footprints, you'd call it scope 2, to do with energy. Scope 1 to do with fuel, diesel that we use in generators and providing backup energy. But the majority of our footprint is to do with that energy scope. So that's our sort of our biggest target. So our footprint at the moment is 200 tons of CO2 equivalent per annum. And that equates to about 3 tons per 1,000 square meters of space that we build. And on average, we try to build about 20,000 square meters of space in the market every year. So pledging to do this, understanding what your footprint is, and then reducing that footprint by minimizing the materials that we use. So for instance, we don't need to use 200 millimeter thick slabs. If you know exactly what the end use of your building is, and you can reduce that to 175 millimeters. So these are just tangible examples of where you can actually reduce the materials that you're using in order to reduce your carbon footprint. And then sharing all of this information with my colleagues on the panel and in the industry, it just makes it a lot easier for others to realize that this is achievable. So those are some of the examples in terms of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so it means very practical and tangible steps that we are sure most of your colleagues can also do. Sometimes it's just awareness. People do not know about these. So it's great that you are sharing this with us. Now, moving on to Jane. Jane is with ABSA. That's where the money is. So if I want to ask, what exactly are the different financing options for green certified projects in Kenya that you see to be available on the market? We are seeing some options in the South African market. Of course, it's much more developed, but in Kenya, are there any? And it's ABSA looking at doing some coming up with some new products similar to what you've done in South Africa.
Thanks, Dennis. And I think first and foremost, in terms of available financing options, of course, the normal commercial lending facilities for mortgages is available for lending. But because we do recognize the whole green agenda is new, and we need to be able to even incentivize clients to be able to buy into the green agenda. So one of the things we've done with select partners who are in this space is to have concessions on the interest rates that are offered to a green mortgage vis-a-vis a non-green mortgage. And so that does help if you reduce the interest rate, because then that is an incentive that anyone will probably have as a welcome advantage to advancing green. But the biggest challenge I think we've also realized is people do not understand green, and therefore there's a big knowledge gap on helping people understand what green means, which we are also trying to do that through some leadership pieces and working with partners, demystifying what it means, demystifying the long-term versus short-term benefits, and having practical examples. One of the things we've done in the last year and a half as ABSA is to do an audit for all our facilities using the IFC Edge application, and that's about 85 branches of thereabouts and 2 head offices, for us to be able to understand exactly what does it mean. And you can be able to have practical examples. So of course, and there's the conversation on expense, which I'm sure I've already seen on the comment section about how expensive it is. Once we did the audit, we realized where we are at and what we need to do. And therefore there was an investment of about maybe give or take about 38 million shillings to cost correct all the branches, from water efficiency, energy efficiency, of course, built material, there's nothing much would have done. The building was already existing. And what we've realized is just having those retrofits done, it's enabled us to have quite a huge cost savings from the monthly power bills we pay, and also the water bills that we pay. And therefore, it has helped us understand and start on creating a proposition where we can fund clients and they can be able to use those savings to be able to repay back whatever investment they make. So our ROI on this was exactly 1.5 years, which is quite short. And therefore, just being able to work out of that experience, then we are able to support our clients much better. And therefore, to your last question, yes, we are planning to introduce some green buildings propositions, but we've realized there's also a big opportunity on retrofits. A lot of people already have the buildings existing. So how do we help them with the retrofitting? But also more importantly, how do you work with the clients from the very onset at design stage? I think it's much cheaper when done from that perspective, which has already been mentioned, and therefore looking at how we work with clients. Again, the affordable housing, which has been spoken to, I think they have committed to EDGE certification as a bare minimum. I think that's fantastic, because then it also helps more people within the whole ecosystem, whether it's contractors, architects, to be able to understand what green means, because if it's a minimum requirement for affordable housing, then it also helps the agenda. So it does also help the agenda, so that we have the supply and the demand matching, because those have been challenges which have been experienced. I think you mentioned the ABSA example where we have eco homes in South Africa. We did finance the commercial property and also now are financing the off-takers, and therefore helps us bridge some of the gaps in quality and which may show up in there. But then if you're not in a very advanced market, then demand becomes a challenge. And we've been working with Garden City in some of the properties that they have, which are already green certified. But that's the fact that they are green, we've not seen such a big uptake because they are green. And so the question is then, how do you incentivize them from another aspect? And that's where pricing comes in, and so forth and so forth. Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. That was very interesting, and that takes me on to my next question with Geoffrey from Kmrc. I mean, Kmrc really has a very big role to play when it comes to affordable housing in Kenya. Now, what exactly has been the recent opportunities and challenges that has been encountered by Kmrc in trying to make sure that buildings in Kenya are affordable and green at the same time?
Thank you, Dennis. From Kmrc, I think the first steps is first to understand the ecosystem and what is available in the market. So what Kmrc has started by doing is to review the whole strategy on how we want to approach the market. And with that, we are already working with the World Bank consultancy to see how we can first understand from a corporate perspective, understand what are the opportunities that Kmrc need to embark on, And from there, then we roll it out to our primary mortgage lenders, because you realize Kmrc business is a business of refinancing mortgages. Already looking at the stock that we started with is a stock of existing properties in the market, which of course are not green certified. And looking at that, for us to create adequate demand, we also need to look at the supply. How do we then bring in supply of green certified homes? So what we are doing is working with our partners, of course, the 20 institutions that are working closely with the Kmrc. That is the 11 circles, 8 banks, and one microfinance bank, and with a lot of support from institutions that are keen on bringing affordability, is to look at what opportunities exist. So what we have started by doing is to identify these institutions on what they are doing, and APSA being a key player in these affordable housing space, because it's one of the beneficiaries of the funding that Kmrc is extending, is we're working closely with these institutions so that we can understand what opportunities do we need to bring. And also, alongside that, we are looking at funding. As we go to the market and generate funding to fund these affordable mortgages, there's an opportunity for a green bond, which Kmrc is keen to issue in the coming years, because then that will enable us to pass some of the benefits to the end consumers, and of course make then green homes more attractive to the consumers. So there are quite a lot of opportunities that exist, and it is a new concept in the Kenyan housing, affordable housing space, and we are very keen to work with the other groups to ensure that we achieve the benefits of net zero.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. So moving on to Kyo for a follow-up on this. Jeffrey is actually letting us know the importance of this new green building concept that's coming up in Kenya. How are we able to utilize these concepts and then the strategies to alleviate the scarcity that we have in the market when it comes to affordable housing? Okay, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was saying scarcity is a big word, but one of the issues about scarcity is the issue about empowerment, about knowledge, about education, and we have found that the word green technologies in itself is very generic, and we have found that the whole issue about training, creating awareness across the board and across the different players. We have currently, and even in the past years, we've been investing a lot of education to the consultants, to the architects who are designing, and even to the contractors at the ground with regards to the whole issue about how do you make this whole green issue more practical. And I think fundamentally one of the issues that, when you look a lot about green building, the overall, I believe the overall goal we are trying to achieve, all of us and everybody else, is the whole issue about minimizing energy use within our sphere of influence. So if it's Maruza, it is within his industrial setup, and for us, it's within our affordable housing. How can we minimize the use of energy? And that we are doing in various ways. For example, we are doing a lot of it in terms of design, about how we can become more efficient in the use of water, how we can basically manage our wastewater better through recycling. And these are the resources that, if, as we have seen, when they're not used properly, they end up become scarce. But if they can be utilized properly, managed properly, they will go a longer way. Other issues we have been doing is just only about keeping our environment green. And for us as developers, especially in the affordable housing space, we have also found that even the way we do our master planning and how we design our communities has a strong impact on how we can actually enhance green initiatives. For example, is the whole issue, for example, about having people working near where they live. What that means is that they are driving less or walking more or cycling more and the whole issue about fuel, the need for the government to begin building these big roads that are using a lot of, carbon-based energies. I mean, all that is reduced. So I think within our space, that's how we are looking at it. And I believe the principles are the same. I think it's the details that differ depending on in which space you're in.
Okay, thanks very much, Kay. Moving on to Maruza. So we've been talking about residential development being green, but beyond these residential developments, how can the projects incorporate green building concepts when it comes to commercial industrial projects?
A simple way that we found is finding the right sort of tool. So sustainability rating tool, because behind the tools, a lot of knowledge, a lot of research, and finding the most appropriate one. So we did a little bit of work. We looked at LEEDs, we looked at BREEAM, and then we looked at EDGE. And for our circumstances in East Africa and what we're trying to achieve, and the simplicity and the ease of use of the tool, we ended up using the EDGE rating tool. We've had the benefit of using it for the last 5 years, and we've actually certified 10 buildings in that time. So that's over 75,000 square meters of space. And with every building that we've built, we've utilized the tool, which has assessed how sustainable our facilities are and highlighted the shortcomings or where we can be innovative or where we can make strategic decisions in procurement to help us get a better outcome. So we focused on 3 main areas. The first one being the energy use, because it's fundamental to everything that we do. Fundamental to the materials that are actually being used to construct our facilities, and also operationally, how we use our energy. So we're using LED fixtures as just like number one. In terms of reducing the need to mechanically ventilate the facilities, we ensure that our window to wall ratios is reduced as absolutely possible. We try to use insulation where we can on the roof, in some of the walls, maybe not all 4, but perhaps the westerly facing walls. Occupancy sensors in all the bathrooms and the facilities and the common areas. So lights aren't on when they don't necessarily have to be there. So from an energy perspective, we've been able to reduce business as usual. So I'm going to use a typical go down, let's call it industrial area. So if you compare that to the type of facilities that we're building through the IFC Edge app, we're able to see energy savings of about 48%. That's 48%. Your utility bills that you're currently paying in your current facility vis-a-vis where you were to move to a facility with this technology, 48%. So that's quite significant and goes right to the bottom line. From a water perspective, our facilities are now able to reduce water consumption by 44%. And this is through the water efficient urinals, your taps, making sure we've got water efficient landscaping. So it's really exciting, and it's not that hard to do. I will talk to how much it costs us later, but that's what we're doing on energy, that's what we're doing on water. And then the big one, the sort of elephant in the room, is the embodied energy in the building materials that we're using. Now, this one's really, really tricky because we're almost putting together a Lego set using other people's materials that they've manufactured, using processes that we have no influence over. So what can we do about it? Well, basically it's choosing specific types of materials with a lower embodied energy, and then trying to use our voice as the customer, the end user, and speaking to these suppliers and saying, listen guys, our tenants have got ESG reporting criteria. Us as a developer builder, we've also got this criteria. Our lenders are now becoming more and more interested in making sure they're financing green initiatives and green facilities. So now we're having to put pressure on these suppliers in the supply chain. And that's where I'm personally finding it very hard, because I don't have that kind of influence. And I'll tell you now, our buildings, typically 51% of it is steel and concrete, you know what I mean? And concrete is probably one of the dirtiest sort of quote unquote materials because of the technology we're using to create it, using all these blast furnaces and emitting all this carbon dioxide. But the good thing is that there's people in Sweden, for instance, and all over the world who are considering using hydrogen as an alternative. So there is technology out there, but unfortunately at the moment, it's actually more expensive than traditional materials. And so if I'm an advocate, I want to use it, but I know my tenant is going to struggle to pay that premium. So there's a whole big conversation that we all need to have, and we all almost need to go around with a hat, and everybody has to chip in, because it's going to be painful for all of us. But if we don't do something about it now, it's going to be way more painful tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Marisa. Yeah, so if we do not do anything about it now, it may become more expensive tomorrow to us. Sometimes we talk about the incremental costs, but this incremental costs, the benefits for implementing some of these measures far outweighs what the incremental cost that we are looking at is. Going to Jane, so for sustainability leads in the financial sector, like yourself, how is green building helping to develop the practice of your real estate clients? And your operations at the bank in general?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. I think one of the things, sitting from a sustainability perspective, is a reality is the initial cost that will come with going green, because it is there. We cannot bury our heads and say that it's not in there. It is there, and it's to look at then how do you help, whether it's the developers, in terms of taking that burden or cushioning that burden without necessarily having it also translated to the off-takers of the facilities. And I'd say that's what we are thinking about. How are we able to do it? But as Marisa said, you can't do it as a financial institution by yourself. There is policy, there's regulation, there's different parties who need to come to the table for this to be able to be seamless from all aspects. So if we look at wanting to incentivize developers who are driving green, to what extent is the bank able to do it without probably incentives coming from the regulator or coming from the government? And so I think it's thinking about how then do we cushion, because if we need to accelerate, we are not able to continue at the pace at which we are moving right now. And then secondly is looking at the entire ecosystem. I think there are different players who plug in, and looking at how then do you support financially, whether it's in terms of the innovations that are coming up that are probably not yet mature enough to stand on their own 2 feet to be able to be financed. Then how do we as a financial institution help to be able to incubate some of those innovations until they get to a point where we can be able to fund them and help them to scale up, or bring in partners who can be able to risk share, because there are new innovations. We are all trying this out together for the first time. And so we have a role to play in terms of just ensuring we can be able to accelerate some of these innovations, which will help their agenda, but then are not yet at that point where they can be, you can go full throttle in terms of financing. And then also just in terms of ecosystem, when it comes to materials, building materials, when you decide you want to go green, do you actually even have local materials that can be used, or everything then needs to be imported? Then how again do you solve for that challenge? So it's looking at the entire ecosystem and saying, how do you solve for the ecosystem and not just one area of financing the off-taker or the person who's buying the property? Because essentially, if it comes out at the other end being more expensive than a non-green building or house, then the demand and supply it won't stack up, and therefore developers will opt just to go with the normal buildings as compared to the green buildings. And I think it definitely, the green agenda, the green buildings agenda is challenging us to look at our business model and how we can be able to provide different business model innovations for financing the needs that are there, and also looking at how we work with the different players in the market. I think capacity building and knowledge is still one of the biggest gaps, if you ask me, because essentially, if you look at the long-term benefits of a green building vis-a-vis one that is not green, I'd almost say it's a no-brainer, but again, it's not. And it's just for you to be able to have those statistics, like Maruza shared. You're reducing your electricity by 48%. You're in a continent where water and probably electricity is not constant, and therefore you need to be able to have better efficiencies. If it's a manufacturing plant, you need to have constant electricity, you need to have constant water. Then how do you work through that? I think lastly, from a retail perspective, as I mentioned, is looking at what products can you be able to offer the retail markets. I think two areas we've seen as a big gap is what wastewater management facilities, which people can be able to tap into at a retail level in your home. Most people are now working virtually or doing hybrid and therefore spending more time at home. So how do you help with cleaner energy, whether it's solar panels that people can be able to have at home so that they reduce their cost of electricity, and different inputs which plug into individuals, even as we look at how we are going to help corporates and much bigger clients within their manufacturing firms. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jane, for the details. That's really helpful. Now, now moving to Rangav. Let's look at the green bond market. There's a lot of talk about green bonds available for green projects. Your organization, ACON, was the very first to launch a green bond in Kenya. Can you take us through the process? How rewarding was it? Is it really a good option for raising financing for projects?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. No, I think let me start with probably the second part of your question. I think it's very much I think a key area to go. The way forward. The Acorn Green Bond essentially provided the debt component for the construction financing of our projects, of 8 projects. As everyone here is aware, real estate is a very capital intensive asset class, and therefore you do need to kind of complement the equity financing with debt financing. And for us, we were able to do that for a select number of projects through the Acorn Green Bond, which was, by the way, upsized to 5.7 billion shillings last year. So it's not just at 5 billion anymore, because we were able to add a couple of new projects given the demand that we were facing from investors. And I think that also points to part of the answer, which is the fact that what you're finding is a lot of investors now are taking a keen interest and having a keen eye on what the issuances are about. Is there an element of ESG sustainability in what they are investing in? And I think that's something that is going to become an increasingly strong criteria for investors when they start assessing the different opportunities that we have. I think that's something that is already visible in the developed markets, and I think it's going to become much more prevalent in our continent. And I think what you'll also find is that the investors that we are trying to tap into, the global investors, will be looking at the responsible citizens of the continent to identify who they should be investing with. And I think that's that's a trend that you're going to continue seeing going forward. In terms of the process for us, obviously this was a cross-listed bond between Kenya and the UK. In terms of the process, it was important for us to be able to substantiate our claim for that green label. We did that two ways. One was that all our buildings were IFC Edge, or are IFC Edge certified. And then on top of that, what we also did was we got the bond to be rated by the Climate Bonds Initiative as well. So I think that put a double, kind of a double stamp of approval, which was necessary in terms of the success of the issuance. The other thing that we, as a layer that we added to the offering, was that we had a 50% guarantee by Garantco, and I think that also enabled for a positive credit rating, which was done by Moody's as well. So I think for us, at the time when we were when we issued the first tranche of the Acorn Green Bond, as some of you might be aware, the bond market, the corporate bond market in particular, had softened considerably as a result of slightly unsuccessful issuances, a couple of slightly unsuccessful issuances. So therefore, we had to take those additional steps to provide assurances to investors. So in our case, it wasn't just about the greenness of the offering, but also in terms of offering a certain level of trustworthiness and credibility. Do I think that's necessarily an obstacle that future issuances will face? I don't think so, and I hope not. I think some of that security package we had to put in place in order to get the corporate bond market, let's say, slightly reinvigorated. I think that's happened now. You can see that from subsequent issuances as well, and hopefully, for other interested parties or other interested issuers in green bonds, as long as I think you can substantiate the green nature of the bond, I think that would ensure that you've kind of covered the biggest hurdle or crossed the biggest hurdle in order to have success in the capital markets.
Okay, thank you. So it means that when Geoffrey's team decides to do a green bond, it should be easier for them, right? Okay, so on that, let me move to Geoffrey. What incentives is Kmrc putting in place to promote climate financing in the housing sector in Kenya? Are you guys coming up with anything new?
Thank you, Dennis. I think, as I mentioned before, even by the other speakers, I think the first thing Kmrc is looking at is capacity building, because we have to work very closely with our financial institutions, because Kmrc operates at a secondary market, meaning that we don't do retail lending. And therefore, our success is directly dependent on how successful our primary mortgage lenders are. So what we are currently doing is, capacity building, first identifying the gaps that are there with these new technologies, and also looking at how can we then pass this information and capacity build for them, so that our primary mortgage lenders are able to sell the right products, are able to come up with the right products that will be able to meet the demands of the market. And I think with that, then we'll have addressed a very big gap of first passing the information, understanding what is required in the market, and also providing solutions. So that is one of the things we are doing. Once we build capacity, then we're able to understand the market better. Secondly, as we roll out some of these products, as we develop a green bond issuance in the future, it will come with the incentives. And actually, that is where now we try to see how then do we package a product through our lenders. How do we package a product that is going to pass the benefits to the consumers? And having built the capacity of the primary mortgage lenders to educate their customers so that they understand what are the benefits, are accruing from a green house, a green certified house. And you see with that, then it will trigger demand in the market, where customers will then know at the end of the day, if I choose to go with this kind of product, what is the benefit that I'm going to do, and what are some of the savings that I'm likely to accrue over the period. And when you look at these and looking at some of the cost savings that has been mentioned in this discussion, those are some things that are very practical, and those are some of the things we need to put in a context so that our consumers are able to understand that initially I might get into a house that is slightly more expensive than a conventional house. However, at the end of the day, because a mortgage is a long-term product, if you're going to take a mortgage for 25 years, then you look at you need to look at the life of that mortgage and how then is it going to impact you financially to the end of the day. So that once you get into that kind of engagement, then you'll see the benefits that will accrue over time, and those are some of the benefits that we need to educate our market.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So coming back to Kyo, what exactly has been the challenges that IHS has faced as a result of your commitment to sustainability?
I think some of the issues were actually mentioned by Jane. I think knowledge. This is a new concept. Not many people fully understand it. Even all the tools that we are using, even as Maruza said, right, this LEED, BREEAM, EDGE, they are pretty new tools, and they are being upgraded at a very fast rate as technology comes on. So it is a new concept. Even at the government level, at the national level, there is a lot of lack of knowledge about the whole issue regarding green. By virtue of the fact that Econ have gone to a point of actually successfully issuing a green bond, I think that's a very big success in a market, and not just this market, even foreign markets, where in first world countries, where these issues are still have not been fully grasped. So I think knowledge is a big issue. I think, and as a result of that lack of knowledge, then the issues regarding financing, implementation, training also basically become big issues. But what we have told ourselves, and I think we have shared this in other fora, when we began greening in South Africa, people thought we were mad. Hey, how can you begin greening, especially affordable housing? We basically crunched the numbers. We invested with the consultants' time and effort, and we were able to do it and eventually we were able to do it even at a cost less than 3%. And people did not realize that. So it is very possible. I think we need to stick at it. I think we need to have more sessions like this to create awareness, especially from different people, as we are all here from different spaces, and hopefully that, amongst other issues, will help try and reduce the challenges that we all face.
Sure. That's interesting. Marisa, what do you think we can do to get developers and then the general public to realize that green and affordability is not mutually exclusive? And I think that's been one of the key messages that has been coming up from this discussion. But how can we do you think there is a strategy for us to get people to really understand that that's not the case?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. The only way really is to tell, just to talk and to talk and to talk and to share, like what we're doing as case studies to our stakeholders. So when a tenant comes and says, look, this is what I'm looking for in terms of my budgets and what I want to achieve, and then try to give that person a sort of a holistic life cycle cost analysis. So the cost you're paying now is not actually the total cost, they're embedded costs down the chain. So I guess trying to explain that to the guys as much as you possibly can may be one way of helping. Green and affordable, I think Jane mentioned it and somebody else mentioned it as well. There is a premium to be paid today. And for instance, I'll use myself as an example. To build a grade B, A- industrial asset in Kenya, exclusive of VAT, would cost around $410 per square meter. Yeah. When we then implement all of our sustainability initiatives, the incremental cost is about $41 per square meter. So there's a 10% premium there that you could build just business as usual and not incur that additional $41, but it is there. And as a business, we think it's worth paying that price, because the price of not paying it and doing business as usual is going to be much higher. So one, we incur that cost and we explain it to whoever we're talking to. Then we explain to you the savings, like how's it going to affect your wallet? And by, like, for instance, the base case for Nairobi utilities is about 81 US cents per square meter of built area. And by utilizing some of these sustainable initiatives, we're able to reduce that by 46 cents per square meter. So being able to demonstrate this to the guys, and then when they're doing their numbers, they start thinking about a big picture. They're like, oh, okay, I can see how this works. This extra $41, it's got a payback in 7.5 years. So the data's there. It's just now getting it across to the guys who know how to do the maths to say, okay, does this make sense or not? But for me, it's an absolutely no-brainer. Just the water example, for instance, we're able to save 178 liters of water per square meter by utilizing these initiatives. And water is becoming more and more scarce. It's going to become more and more of an issue. So yeah, collating this data and sharing it with everybody who will listen, the financier, the tenants, the contractors, the consultants, I think that's sort of going to help us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we really need to showcase these case studies that are available. We need to show the green certified projects on the continent and how well they're doing, what was done, and then what's the motivation. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that would be the way to go. Coming back to you, Jane, for your last words. I mean, a similar question to Maruza's. What exactly are the main barriers that you think could impede decisive corporate action in implementing sustainable business practice?
I think one of the biggest challenges, of course, is initial investment, as has been spoken about. And therefore, that becomes a big challenge in as much as a corporate organization wants to be able to make that transition. Then how do they fund that opportunity? Or if it's a new facility, then how do they fund that? And then, of course, secondly is the lack of knowledge and capacity. And I won't speak to that again because it's already been mentioned. But I think also the third thing I'd mention is the relevance of place. And I think when you look at the African continent and specifically Kenya, between driving an agenda around green building versus driving an agenda about affordable housing, where I guess housing is a basic human right, and we have quite a number of people who do not have access to adequate or affordable homes. And therefore, then how do you integrate the two? Because then even as we speak about green housing, I think it's more about looking at affordable housing and embedding green within there, because what we first need is to provide housing, which is a basic need and at an affordable rate, and all the other social aspects which come within the whole ecosystem. So when we are looking at affordable housing, then how are we ensuring the communities that are being built there are livable, that basic things like hospitals, schools, roads, and everything are available within that community? Because then just building an affordable house without everything else around that ecosystem then doesn't solve for the problem, really creates a bigger problem. And I think I alluded to it, when you build a house and then people still need to drive many kilometers to find health facilities, to find schools, to find social amenities that they need. So I think just looking at the whole entire ecosystem of the housing and the social aspects, the health aspects, the green aspects, and being able to just embed those together and be able to have a project which not only drives the green agenda, but also drives the social aspects, which are very much required within the country. So I think just having a blend of that, and the more you think about it, it becomes very complex. So we have the conversation around, do you want to have a green bond or a social bond? What does the social bond cover versus the green bond, and which one is more critical to the country now, and which way do we need to go? And how can we be able to embed all those? So I think those are some of the challenges of seeing what is most relevant and having to be able to embed it in everything else that is required to run a sustainable business practice.
Sure, thanks. So I think we have some comments. I would let Rangav say the last words, and then we can move to the questions and then try to provide answers to them. So, Rangav, what exactly is coming next? What's up in terms of green building trends? What exactly is Acorn looking at doing, especially in your niche market, which is student accommodation?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So I think a few ways to look at it. I mean, in terms of, what's next, we continue to strive for more areas where we can, let's say, make our buildings more effective. Currently, on the basis of the implementations that we've put in place, we're able to save about 30% on our utilities. That's without the implementation of solar energy. So that's something that we're already working on. We've had a pilot scheme in one of our projects, and we're going to continue now. I mean, given the results that we've seen with that pilot scheme, we're actually now spreading that right across our portfolio. We're very much at the initial stages of our student accommodation journey. We're only offering about 4,000 beds, but we, based on our market research, we're aware that the addressable demand is far greater than that, and I think that also speaks to what Jane just spoke about, and I think what Maruza also referred to earlier, which is the kind of connectivity to where you are and where you have to go. Typically, our projects are about 2.5 kilometers radius from target universities. So we very much aim to provide housing within a walking distance for where you have to go, and that's if one thinks about it, if we're able to kind of plug that housing gap that is there in its student accommodation, that should hopefully enable us to bring down the cost or not cost, but bring down the usage of transportation fuel, whether it's from private vehicles or public transportation. We're looking at other ways that we can kind of bring down utility expenses across the board, because that, of course, then leads to greater operational efficiency and leads to better returns for investors. We're also always looking for ways to optimize space design as well in our properties, because obviously the more efficient your design, the less building materials you use. If you actually look at our initial buildings, the ones that were launched in 2017 to 18, and compare them to the ones that have recently been launched, you'll see a stark difference in not just kind of the look and feel, that's superficial, but more just the kind of internal layout and how we've tried to make common area space a lot more compact as well, while still being able to provide that environment and that ambience. And I think that's the last thing. I mean, the good thing is for us, our target customer base, are, I don't know what they are now anymore, millennials or Gen Z, and for them, this is a very much a key consideration, right? The care, looking out for the planet, looking out for future generations. And if that's something that we can display, then I think that holds us in good stead going forward. And that's exactly what I would encourage other potential participants in this space to do as well.
Sure. Thank you so much. We still have about 15 minutes left on the clock. Let me go through some of the questions that we have on the comments page. So there is a question for ABSA. I think this is actually targeted at South African office, but I don't know if Jane would be willing to provide an answer. So the question is, how is the uptake on green mortgages at ABSA? Is the concession on interest rates driving demand?
Thanks, Dennis. I think, and thanks, Flora, for that question. I think the uptake within South Africa and Kenya is very different first. So I think the uptake in South Africa has been much better. And the way that it was done, from financing the commercial property to financing the off-takers and being able to work through the demand and supply along the way, I think that was one of the reasons why the uptake was quite good. But also definitely the concession on the interest rate is also attractive to the client who's buying the property. Coming back to Kenya, I'd say I haven't seen the concession on interest rates yet driving demand. And there are various factors. Maybe it's because specifically for the project that we were supporting, the cost is still much higher than what would call the normal Kenyan would afford, and therefore the uptake wasn't as much, even with the concession on interest rates. So there is still something we need to work on there in terms of demand and supply, just to ensure that you can be able to have the demand as you supply. Otherwise, you end up with a project that is not moving. But also the affordability part counts a lot for Kenya. Like, if you need to be able to drive green mortgages at scale, then I only see it viable by embedding affordability, because then that becomes a critical aspect to the target market that you are looking to buy into this mortgages. And so with the affordable housing project, we hope to be able to see a shift in that, because the houses are quite affordable. And since they will be green certified, then you're providing housing at scale, but then they're already certified as green, and therefore you're able to meet two critical aspects of that deliverable.
Okay, thank you, Jane. So there's another question here, which I would leave open for any of the panelists to answer. So the question is on, he's asking that a focus on the green developer revenues would be interesting to explore, because usually it takes about 10% increment cost to put up a green building. Now, in a market where it's purely profit driven, he thinks developers are struggling to have all their projects certified as green. Is it possible that we can have some of the panelists to tell us how you've been able to manage this? Maybe IHS or ALP, or maybe Acorn, would you be able to give us? I think you've already touched on some of them, but he wants some more details on how exactly you've been able to manage all of this.
One example from ALP's perspective is that we've been lucky in that our investors are patient capital. So not your typical private equity fund that has got a short life cycle and needs to exit as quickly as possible. So having that kind of a shareholder behind us has made it a lot easier to take more risks in terms of pushing the sustainability agenda, knowing that our shareholders want to make an impact. So yeah, that's just an example of how it's made it a little bit easier for us, for instance, to be able to achieve some of these goals.
Great. Kerry, do you want to come in? Okay, Rangav has unmuted. Okay.
No, what I was going to say is that, I guess it depends on what development one is talking about, because I'm intrigued by the 10% cost increment. That's not necessarily something we've seen. I think what tends to happen is that, if you find that, it depends on a kind of developer's ability, but if you find that there's cost pressures elsewhere, it always drives a need to find cost savings elsewhere. So if I look at our overall building cost, do I see that it has increased by the fact that we've implemented edge related measures? I'm not exactly convinced by that. I don't think we've seen a material cost increase, if anything significant at all. And I'll refer to what I said earlier, because I think for us, because we're not just a developer who looks to sell, we're a developer who looks to hold on to our asset. For us, that operations aspect is also equally important as well. What happens once the construction team or the development team hands over the building to the property management team. So we have to look at it holistically, and again, whilst it might not provide you a boost to revenue, which is kind of what Flora's initial statements about. Hey, look, does the green development kind of increase your revenue? It doesn't. Not really. It might make your building offering a bit more attractive. Like I said, because now more and more tenants, buyers are looking at the sustainability of real estate. They might say, okay, if I've got two options in front of me, one is green certified, the other is not. The likelihood is more and more they're going to be going for the green certification, green certified building. But because we rent out our buildings, I don't necessarily see it as boosting revenues. What I do see it as is reducing costs, and that's another way that you can obviously improve profitability overall, and therefore enhance the yield to those investors. And I think Maruza was spot on. It's also about who you align yourself with. If you don't have patient capital in with you, then you're likely going to face pressure on, hey, what is it that you're doing in the short term? Why is this not working in the short term? But if someone has a let's say medium to long term, and it doesn't even need to go to long term, I think medium to long term horizon for their investment, it's something that very much makes sense.
Just to piggyback on what the gentlemen have said, I think that some of the figures that are there, they're a bit generic. There are many variables. When you look at adoption of green technologies in buildings and what effect that has on the buildings, the variables are many. The asset class has a significant effect on that. And even within some asset classes like residential, you have high-end, medium, low. And even within those bands, you will find differences. But some of the things that actually come into for us, number one is economies of scale. And I think that also comes into play for Aecon, especially in your design and the amount of units that you're developing. So even in your R&D, the amounts of money we spend in our R&D and initial investments in these technologies, by virtue of the fact that the plan is to roll out a lot of units, then from a cost perspective, that basically it actually helps cushion the costs that are coming to play. Another interesting thing, I think, is that with Edge, one of the interesting about Edge is that there are various interventions. And all these specific interventions can be costed. You can then have a cost-benefit analysis against each of those interventions to basically see whether they basically meet your objectives. Because you find that for some is that the objective may not always necessarily be a cost issue. Some of the objectives may actually be an issue regarding the functional requirements of the building. Again, going back to the asset class issue. So I think there are very many variables. But also another issue that we have seen, and especially on the rental side, is that you find that one of the key indicators, I think, for these various interventions is actually on the yield that actually has been mentioned. Because you find that quite a few of the interventions that you are incurring, that you are basically bringing to a building from the edge perspective, have very long-term project life cycle effects. And if you look at some, for example, some of the new LED, some of the new energy-saving lighting, the capital expense may be a bit high initially, but they last very, very long. The maintenance costs are very low. So you begin finding that this also for a rental property, especially one that is big, has got thousands of lights along the way, that it actually has an effect on the yield along the way. So I think it is difficult to answer that question in one sentence. I think there are many variables, but in principle, I think it works based on the objectives that you have.
Great. And I think that question also speaks to the fact that we sometimes assume green buildings should be very expensive. Flora said it's about 10% extra to go green. However, I'm not sure she's done any analysis on it. It's just a general perception that going green should be very, very expensive. So it's always great to hear from projects like yours that have actually done green projects at lower incremental cost than what the perception is on the market. Now, there's another question here. So he says, can we expect higher rental income from EDGE-certified buildings? And what are the intermediaries that are used for green bonds? I think for the first part, we've already answered that. Either Geoffrey or Rangav, would you want to tell us what the intermediaries that you used for your bonds in Africa, in Kenya?
I don't know if Geoffrey would like to come in. I don't want to speak too much, but in terms of, I think, intermediaries, I assume by that Tristan is referring to transaction advisors. I think typically for any capital market issuance, you do need to have a financial advisor on board, a transaction advisor. These are typically licensed entities by the capital markets authorities. And I think what you'll find is that in terms of capability, they all will be able to provide the service, but it's just a matter of experience as well. And I think that's important. We worked with Stanbic Bank for our Acorn Green Bond issuance, but I know that there's also other work that has been done by financial institutions such as ABSA as well, who we ourselves are working on other fronts. There's a number of options available in the market.
I think I can add on that. I think it's the same concept of the financial advisors that you use in a typical bond, only that now it goes a notch higher because then you have to bring in the aspect of certification in terms of the green technology certification, and the other aspect of financial advisory, transaction advisor in terms of the arrangement and all that. It follows suit because then it has also to go through the CMA certification. But you just take it a notch high, and also you tie it to the class of asset that you are going to pack the use of the funding that you are raising in the market. For instance, if Kmrc was to issue a bond, then we have to look at supply that is there in the market that meets the criteria that has been established in the raising of the capital. Of course, when you're raising the green funding, it will come with some incentives, in terms of the tax, incentives that the investors will get at the end of the day. Pricing might be a bit lower because then you're able to attract very long-term and funding in the market. And when you pack it to the supply side, when you are refinancing the mortgages, then the housing units then need to be satisfied so that they can match the asset liability matching that you're looking at. And that's how you look at the whole chain on how you're raising your funding.
Okay, great. So I think that's all time will allow us to do. But then just in summary, from the session today, what we've seen is that, yes, green building is going to be a trend that will continue from now in the future. It would even become more important in the future than we are seeing it now. And then also, it's very important for us to do a lot more public awareness on green building. We need to get the public to understand why we need to build green, what are the benefits, what are the long-term impacts and all that. And then it's very interesting. I mean, we're happy to hear that Kmrc is considering doing a green bond in the future. So it's likely we'll see a lot more green bonds in the Kenyan markets very soon. And we've also seen the impact or the importance of sharing data. Sometimes we certify projects and we don't want to even let people know about it. It's wrong. Projects that are certified, we need to really look at what the impact has been. Let's share the data on it. After operating it for a while, what has been the impact? What has been the savings that you are getting? Just like Maruza and then Kyo mentioned, you've been able to analyze your project over time to see what the savings are. Such stories or such data is very, very key. And once other developers get to hear about it, it helps them to change their mindsets on what exactly they should also do to get green. And capacity building is very key. People need to really understand how they can build green. What exactly will it take for them to go green? The technical knowledge and the training is very, very important. So this is another area that all the key stakeholders should be involved in. And last but not the least, we need to take action now before it's too late. Building green is very important. We need to protect our environment and ensure that we are still able to utilize it properly. All right, so I'll say thank you to my panelists for joining us, and then to anybody that's joined us virtually. We are also grateful for those questions that we couldn't answer. Kindly send it to API. They would share it with us, and then we would make sure we respond to it. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.